Hello everyone, this is High Priestess Tana and I'm coming back with the final uh part to this video, okay? I know I've been saying that for the past few videos probably, but this dang old camera just keep coming, like just keep cutting off. But I want to touch base on about William McComb. So now we find out that the McComb family owned slaves, and this was brought to people's attention by Joel Thurtle. He was a or is a Detroit Free Press reporter, and he brought it to the to people's attention in the community that William McComb owned slaves. So Denise de Bosset, who was McComb's wait a minute, granddaughter, so five times great granddaughter, told Thurtle, "No, I wasn't aware of them having slaves at all. That's funny. You think there would have been talk about slaves running a farm? Nobody ever talks about it on our side. I wonder if it was out of embarrassment or it wasn't politically correct. Nobody ever talked about slaves. I'll be darned." And in an article, it says, "I have two friends whose roots in Detroit go back to the French period of the early 1700s. When I told them their ancestors had owned slaves, they thought I was joking. One friend who had researched her family's history was flabbergasted when I broke the news. No way," she said. "Wow, nobody told me anything about that. But I guess they wouldn't. I am just embarrassed. That's interesting, fascinating. They're hardly alone in their obliviousness. Students of local history could research Detroit's past for years before they would stumble across evidence of slavery. Since the early 1970s, slavery in Detroit has been a subject of research by a small number of scholars who wrote academic articles that were mostly read by other academics and advanced students. One graduate student named Arthur Cooker wrote his doctoral dissertation in 1941 at the University of Michigan on abolitionists in Michigan before the Civil War. In his preface, Cougar wrote about his surprise when he discovered slavery itself had existed in Michigan. I'm just as flabbergasted, like, what? Like, this is crazy, yo. This is some crazy work right here. As the work progressed, one fact that seemed to require an exploration kept bobbing up. He wrote, "Rooted deep in Michigan's past was the very institution which had called the anti-slavery movement into being." That's crazy. I'm just still like, what? And it says Detroit's selective memory, however, has remained intact. Almost nothing has been done to seek out the truth about the role of slavery in Detroit's history, and that seems unfortunate in a region where the theoretical underpinning of slavery, racism, remains a paramount issue. Wow. And this was written in 2012, I want to say. Yeah. No, sorry, not 2012. Oh, yes, it was. It was originally written in 2012, but they republished it June 20th, 2020. Okay. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, but this is the original article that was written in 2012. So I'm going to read something from Tia Miles, who's also like a historian and a professor at University of Michigan. Yeah, she's a history professor at University of Michigan. We'll talk about some things that she discussed as well. Um, Wait a minute. Okay, there we go. All right, so right. Slowly the curtain has begun to rise across the country on slavery and other forms of historical racism. Most notably, the collective amnesia is disappearing that allowed the North to absolve itself of involvement in slavery while castigating the South. People are realizing that understanding slavery is central to understanding the origins of America itself. Facts. I agree. It's not a happy story. It's probably not a coincidence that we celebrate the uplifting saga of the Detroit and the Underground Railroad, rather than the tremendously sad story of Detroit in human captivity for a nation and city built on a notion of freedom. To consider the idea that slavery was also a major part of the foundation is difficult and disillusioning. Yes. Uh Now let's switch to the other article. I'm not going to go too heavy in depth with this because we basically talked about some of the same things, and we've actually gotten a lot of details from this woman who appears to be very well detailed and well versed with her research. Um, Tia Miles, a professor in the Department of Afro American and African Studies, and a 2011 recipient of the MacArthur Foundation's Genius Grant, is shining a light on Detroit's dark secret in her new book, The Dawn of Detroit, a chronicle of slavery and freedom in the city of straits. And this article was written or published rather February 19th, 2018, refuting some long held stereotypes about the early American North and South. Miles paints a picture of Detroit from about 1760 to 1815, when Native Americans and African Americans were considered property. It was something that stood out to me. I was looking again to make sure I'm not repeating myself, because I noticed that I will repeat myself sometimes because I feel like it need to be reiterated. But um oh, okay. And I mentioned this before. It was a market in skins. This is how Detroit started off. Slavery in Detroit grew out of the bustling fur trade when the settlement was still under French control, Miles says. As trade ramped up along the busy river port, the power brokers needed a labor force to grow and process food, handle fur, operate boats, maintain domestic spaces, and more. At this time, Native American slaves local to the region outnumbered their African American counterparts in Detroit. Uh, let's see. Trade in the pelts of beavers and trading in the bodies of persons became contiguous endeavors in Detroit, forming an intersecting market in skins that takes on the cast of the macabre, Miles writes in her book. In addition, she says, some slaveholder merchants also stole territories from native people, which she describes as the intertwined theft of bodies and land. That's what I was looking for, because I didn't really elaborate on that before. Um, yeah. According to Miles, whose previous books addressed slavery in the American South, the earliest African American slaves to arrive in Detroit likely came as the property of French owners by way of Montreal. But even as the French lost control of Detroit to the British, the practice continued. Traveling from the Northeast in New York, the British often brought slaves with them to Detroit. And New York, they also entered into sales agreements to buy more African Americans who were then sent to the settlement. The early censuses posted by Miles and her students revealed the number of slaves steadily increased through the years. Records from 1773 showed there were 73 slaves in Detroit. By 1782, the number had more than doubled to 170. Even after the Northwest Ordinance took effect in 1787, clearly prohibiting slavery, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist in the territory. Slaveholders found loopholes in the language and continued as though nothing had changed. I talked about that in part one. In 1795, the Jay Treaty between the U.S. and Great Britain averted war with England, but it did little to change the status of Detroit slaves. The treaty did ban the future purchase of slaves, but did nothing to free the nearly 300 people in bondage. An 1817 letter written by Detroit's merchant John R. Williams, descendant of the slaveholding Campbell family on his mother's side. See how all these families intertwine with each other? Revealed how deeply entrenched slavery was in Detroit's culture, Miles says. Williams wrote to Samuel Abbott, a lawyer at Mackinac, to do a deal. He would be glad to have a Native American boy and girl from 12 to 18 years of age bound under indenture to serve for a limited number of years, say to the age of 30, he wrote. And if Abbott would do Williams the service of sending him a boy and girl of good moral habits and tractable disposition, Williams would clear the account on Abbott's draft at sight. Williams's request bespoke his close association of Native American people with servitude. Miles writes, the merchant thought the French term for Native American slave was the name of a particular tribe. Yeah, we talked about the Dennison family already. But I want to elaborate on something else. So it said, once freed, the elder Dennises went to work for a wealthy lawyer who encouraged them to sue for the freedom of their children under the Northwest Ordinance. That's basically what it was trying to say. What I was trying to say, what the other information was trying to convey when I was talking about that earlier. It will be the first legal case to define the parameters of slavery in the Michigan territory. Unfortunately, for the Dennises, slaveholder and Judge Augustus Woodward sided with the Tuckers. The Michigan Supreme Court returned the children to slavery, leaving the parents no option but to escape to Canada with their offspring. Woodward eventually ruled the Michigan territory had no obligation to return slaves who had been freed by establishing residence in Canada. So, in about 1815, Elizabeth Lisette Dennison, Hannah and Peter's daughter, returned to Detroit as a free citizen. She worked as a domestic servant, eventually becoming a successful businesswoman and property owner. Upon her death, Dennison willed some $3,000 toward the construction of a church. Today, the doors to the St. James Episcopal Church at Grosse Ile are dedicated to her. Right. That's what I was looking for. Okay, so yeah, that was interesting. I really liked doing this research. It was very enlightening. I'm glad that some of the slaves found justice because it was well overdue. And I would say it was an honor doing this research and as well as this video. And I hope that you all are doing great and y'all enjoy the rest of y'all day. And thank you so much. Peace. Again, this is High Priestess Tana signing off. And y'all stay blessed and stay safe. All right. Talk to y'all soon.